Welcome back to the deep dive.
Glad to be here for this one.
Yeah, I want to start today with a question that feels like it should be the absolute easiest thing in the world to answer.
Okay.
It sounds like something a 5-year-old would ask you while you're, stuck in traffic.
Those are always the best questions.
They really are. But if you actually try to answer this one, really sit down and answer it, you realize it might be the hardest question in the entire scientific canon.
I love those kinds of questions, the ones that seem so simple until you start pulling the thread.
Huh?
So, what is it?
What is life?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. And I don't mean the dictionary definition.
Sure.
I don't mean that little checklist we all learned in grade school biology. I mean, when we look out the window or when you look in the mirror, how do we actually conceptualize the thing that is living?
It really is the fundamental question of biology. And usually the answer we give to that is, well, pretty standard. We think of the individual.
Right. The protagonist of this story.
Exactly.
The dog, the tree, the bacteria, you, me. We picture these discrete biological units.
Because that's how we experience the world.
Exactly. They have boundaries.
Mhm.
I end here, and the air begins there. You end over there, the table begins here.
It's a very bounded way of looking at existence.
It is. And the narrative we've built around this, really ever since Darwin, is that these units are in a constant state of competition.
Yes.
We are fighting for survival, we're eating, we're reproducing, and trying desperately not to die.
That is the classical biological view in a nutshell. It's what we call the Red Queen hypothesis.
Running just to stay in place.
Exactly. You're constantly running just to keep up with everything else that's evolving around you. In that view, the individual is the primary actor on the stage, and the environment is just the scenery.
Just the background they're struggling against.
Right. It's a very isolated way of looking at life.
But today, we're going to break that stage entirely.
We really are.
What if that view is just fundamentally wrong?
Or at least fundamentally incomplete.
Yeah. What if we've been looking at the painting from like an inch away, obsessing over the brushstrokes, and we've completely missed the actual subject of the painting?
That is exactly the pivot we are making today. We're moving from the micro scale to the macro scale.
And it completely changes the story.
It changes everything.
So for you listening, we are diving into a really fascinating, honestly somewhat radical paper today. It's titled The Global Genome: Viruses as Mobile Planetary Organelles.
It's a brilliant piece of work.
And the mission for this deep dive, our goal here, is to challenge the traditional taxonomy that says viruses aren't alive.
Which is a bold claim right out of the gate.
It is. But we aren't just going to argue that they are alive.
Yeah.
We're going to argue that they are essentially the glue holding the whole world together.
Yes. We are going to explore the premise that the biosphere, so the entire layer of life on Earth, isn't just a collection of things living on a rock.
Right.
The premise of our source is that the biosphere is a single hyperorganism, one massive, completely interconnected living system.
And in that system, the characters we usually think of as the ultimate villains, the viruses, they get a complete rewrite.
A total rebrand.
Yeah, they aren't these dead hijackers or, biological glitches anymore. They are essential mobile organelles.
No, precisely. If you change the scale at which you define life, the virus changes from an invading enemy into a vital, functional organ.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because hyperorganism sounds like, I don't know, something out of a sci-fi novel.
Or a very intense yoga retreat.
Exactly. But the paper grounds this in some serious, hard scientific history. It starts by referencing the Gaia hypothesis.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard of Gaia, but usually in a very spiritual Mother Earth kind of sense.
Right, and that's the baggage the term carries today.
It has a very 1970s counterculture vibe to it.
It does, but we really need to strip that away to understand where this paper is coming from. The Gaia hypothesis was proposed back in the 70s by James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis.
And Lovelock wasn't a spiritual guru, right?
Not at all. He was an atmospheric chemist working for NASA.
A hard scientist.
Very much so. He was actually looking for ways to detect life on Mars.
Okay, so he was looking for chemical signatures.
Exactly.
Like, how do you know a planet is alive without actually landing a rover on it and digging around?
Right, because we couldn't just go there easily. And in doing that research, he realized something absolutely profound about Earth just by comparing it to our planetary neighbors.
What did he find?
Well, the mixture of gases we have in our atmosphere, oxygen, nitrogen, methane, carbon dioxide, it is chemically completely unstable.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning if you took those gases and just put them in a sealed jar They would react with each other and eventually settle into a boring, static equilibrium.
Like what you see on Mars or Venus.
Exactly. Those atmospheres are dead in a chemical sense. They are done reacting. There's no energy left in the system.
They've reached their final state.
Right. They are stable. But
Hmm?
Earth is wildly unstable. We have high oxygen and high methane existing simultaneously in the atmosphere.
Which shouldn't happen.
It shouldn't happen chemically. Those two gases react and destroy each other. They shouldn't exist together unless something is constantly pumping them back into the air to maintain that highly specific, highly unstable balance.
And that something is life.
It is life.
So Lovelock and Margolis suggested that the Earth's surface essentially acts as a self-regulating system.
Yes, it maintains its own temperature and its own chemistry to keep the conditions optimal for life.
So it's not just that life adapted to a static rock.
No, life actively shaped the rock and the air to suit itself.
Okay, so our source today is taking that concept Gaia and moving it from a neat sort of metaphor to a rigorous biological framework.
They're formalizing it.
They're calling it the hyperorganism. But I have to push back just a little bit here.
I do.
It's a very nice poetic idea to say we are all one, but physically, I am not attached to a tree in the Amazon.
You are not.
I'm distinct. I can walk away. So how does the paper justify calling a bunch of separate animals and plants a single organism?
That's the absolute crux of the argument. The definition hinges entirely on interconnection. Specifically, what the paper calls flows.
Flows.
Yes. The paper argues that a hyperorganism is a system where the units of life, which we usually think of as individual cells or multicellular organisms like you and me, are so deeply interconnected by these flows that they function as a single physiological entity.
A physiological entity. That implies a shared metabolism, right?
It does.
Like a shared system of just keeping things running.
Exactly. Think about your own body for a second. You are made of roughly 30 trillion cells.
Give or take a few million.
Right. Now, does a single liver cell inside, you know that it's part of the host?
I wouldn't think so.
Does it have a concept of your personality or your career or what you're planning to have for dinner tonight?
I certainly hope not. It's just doing liver stuff.
Exactly.
Filtering toxins, processing glucose. It has a very mundane 9-to-5 existence.
Precisely. To that liver cell, it is just living its own life. It's an autonomous unit operating in its immediate local environment.
But it's part of me.
But it creates a higher order entity because it is inextricably connected to the heart cells, the brain cells, the skin cells.
Through flows.
Through flows. Blood flow, chemical signals, hormones, electrical impulses in the nervous system.
Okay, so the argument here is that the Earth is just me scaled up. Like the atmosphere is the blood.
In a functional physical sense, yes. The bacteria in the soil, the plankton in the ocean, the trees in the forests, and the humans in the cities, we are all connected by these massive nutrient cycles.
Carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus.
Water, these are the metabolic flows of the planet.
That is really humbling. It's a bit of a vertigo moment when you try to visualize it.
It shifts your entire perspective.
But it also really messes with our definitions, doesn't it? I mean, usually to be considered alive, you need autonomy.
Right, independence.
You need to be able to metabolize energy on your own. If I'm just a cell in a hyperorganism, does that mean I'm not really the definition of life? Or that I'm only partially alive?
That is the philosophical edge of this paper, and it's sharp. It argues that we fundamentally need to redefine life.
How so?
In the hyperorganism model, autonomy and true metabolism are properties of the whole system, not the parts.
Wait, the planet has a metabolism?
The planet is a metabolism.
Wow.
It cycles energy from the sun, it processes matter through the crust and the atmosphere, and it expels waste heat back into space.
Okay, I see that.
And autonomy. Think about it. You, as a human, are not autonomous.
I like to think I am.
You do, but if I put you in a sealed vacuum, or even just a sealed concrete room with absolutely no other life forms in it, what happens?
I die pretty quickly.
Exactly, you die.
Yeah.
You are completely dependent on the plants for oxygen, the soil microbes to grow your food, the gut bacteria to digest it. You aren't autonomous at all.
I'm dependent on the flows.
Yes, but the Earth maintains its own homeostasis against the cold vacuum of space. That is true autonomy.
So the only true individual out there is the biosphere itself.
That is the argument the paper makes. Everything else is just a component.
Okay, so if we accept this frame, that the Earth is the body, then we have to look at the parts of that body differently.
We do.
We have the cells. That's us, the animals, the plants, the bacteria. But everybody needs a way to move things around.
Yes.
Everybody needs a regulatory system. And this brings us to the villain of the story, or at least the deeply misunderstood character,
The virus.
the virus.
The most abundant biological entity on the planet.
And in traditional biology, viruses are in this really weird limbo. I remember in high school biology, the textbook basically said they are non-living.
Right. They were always relegated to the margins of the chapter.
Exactly. They were this annoying exception to the rules.
And the source materials calls this the semantic fallacy of viral non-life.
A semantic fallacy. I mean,
Okay.
that sounds like we're just arguing over words, like, and is a hot dog a sandwich kind of debate.
It sounds like pedantry.
Yeah. Does it really matter what we call them?
It matters immensely.
Yeah.
Because the words we use define how we investigate reality.
Right.
If we call them non-living, we stop looking for their biological purpose. We just treat them like debris or errors.
So why do we typically classify viruses as non-living in the first place?
Well, the paper says it's because in their virion state-like, when they're just floating in the air or sitting on a doorknob, they're completely inert.
Right. They don't eat, they don't breathe, they don't reproduce on their own.
Exactly. They are just a tiny crystal of genetic code wrapped in a protein shell. They lack any independent metabolic machinery.
So if you leave a virus on a table, it will never do anything.
Nothing. It will just sit there until it degrades from UV light or heat. It is, for all intents and purposes, a complex microscopic rock.
So by the standard definition of life, which says you must have a metabolism, it is a rock.
Yeah.
It's just chemistry, not biology.
That's the traditional view. But here is the counter-argument the source presents, and I really love this analogy because it perfectly exposes the double standard we have in biology.
Let's hear it.
Consider a mitochondrion.
The powerhouse of the cell. I think that's literally the one thing everyone remembers from high school biology class. It's the ultimate biology meme.
It is the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria are inside almost all of our cells, generating the energy we need to live.
And they're weird, right? Because they have their own DNA.
They do, which heavily suggests they used to be independent, free-living bacteria billions of years ago.
But they got swallowed.
They got engulfed by a larger cell and formed a symbiotic relationship. But now, today, they are organelles.
Okay.
Now imagine you extract a single mitochondrion from a liver cell and you put it on that exact same table right next to the virus.
Okay, so I've got a virus on the left, a mitochondrion on the right, both just sitting on a cold lab bench.
Does that mitochondrion have independent life?
Well, no.
Can it reproduce on the table? Can it sustain itself?
No, it needs the cell's nutrients, it needs the cytoplasm to float in, it needs the host's nucleus to send it chemical signals.
Exactly. It dies almost instantly outside the host cell.
So outside the cell, the mitochondrion is just as dead as the virus.
It is completely incapable of independent life. Yet, do we ever hesitate to consider mitochondria alive?
Well, yeah. We consider them living parts of a living cell. We definitely don't call them inert crystals.
We don't.
We draw diagrams of them doing work and making ATP.
Right. We consider them alive because of their role within the cellular context. Their aliveness is entirely derived from their function in the broader system.
Oh, I see where this is going. It's all about context.
It is entirely about context.
We've been judging the virus based on its commute, not its actual job.
That is a brilliant way to put it. The source argues that we have been using the completely wrong context to evaluate the virus.
Because we're looking too closely.
Exactly. If you only look at a virus in a single cell, the virus looks like a parasite. It looks like something from the outside that is attacking the inside.
Right.
But if you zoom out, if the fundamental unit of life is actually the biosphere, the hyperorganism, then the context shifts completely.
The context becomes the entire planetary network.
Correct. And in the context of that planetary network, the virus isn't outside of life at all. It is a highly specialized organelle.
It just happens to be a mobile organelle.
Precisely. It exists in a permanent state of transit.
Wow.
The time it spends floating in the air or drifting in the ocean water isn't death. It's just the commute. It's moving between the localized cellular compartments of the larger hyperorganism.
That just reframes everything. It's not a bug in the operating system, it's a feature.
It's an essential feature.
It's a component designed specifically to move. It's almost like a red blood cell. I mean, a red blood cell floating in a glass jar isn't doing much of anything, but inside the body, it's an essential transport mechanism.
Yes. And if it's a component designed to move, we naturally have to ask the next logical question.
What is it moving? And why is it moving it?
Right. If it's an organelle, it has to have a job.
The mitochondria handles energy production. The nucleus handles data storage. So what does the virus handle?
According to this deep dive into the source material, the virus handles connectivity.
Connectivity.
Think about a multicellular body again. You have nerves to send electrical signals instantly. You have blood vessels to move physical resources.
Right.
But in the planetary hyperorganism, the individual cells, the bacteria in the ocean, the fungi in the soil, the animals walking around, they are physically separated from each other.
They aren't physically touching.
Right. There are massive gaps of air and water between them.
So you need a mechanism to bridge that gap, like a wireless network.
You need a highly efficient way to move information across the entire system. That is the virus.
Okay.
And this leads us to the first major planetary function the paper describes: distributed genetic processing.
This is where we get into some heavy science, but it's absolutely fascinating. The paper talks a lot about horizontal gene transfer, or HGT. Let's really distinguish this for the listeners so we're all on the same page.
Good idea.
Vertical transfer is what we're all used to, right?
Yes.
Parents pass their genes down to their children. You move down the branches of the family tree.
Correct. Vertical evolutionary inheritance. It's the fundamental basis of the Darwinian tree of life.
It's robust. It works.
It works, but it's incredibly slow. It takes generations and generations. If a parent develops a highly useful mutation, only their direct, immediate offspring get to benefit from it.
It stays locked in that family silo.
Exactly. It's isolated.
It's like a secret family recipe for, I don't know, the best pasta sauce. Only the kids get to know it. No one else in the town gets to use it.
That's right. But horizontal gene transfer is, well, it's sideways.
Sideways.
It is the active movement of genetic code between individuals who are not related at all.
Okay.
Sometimes they aren't even the same species or even in the same kingdom of life.
And viruses are the trucks that carry this cargo.
They are the trucks, they are the cargo ships, and they are the fiber optic cables of the planet. Viruses move genetic code across vast phylogenetic distances.
Meaning across totally different types of life.
Yes. We see viruses moving genes between bacteria and archaea. We even see them moving genes between plants and insects.
That's wild. Can you give us a really concrete example of this? How does this actually play out in the wild? Because we usually just think of a virus injecting its own bad, destructive code to make you sick.
Sure, let's look at a real-world scenario. The classic example in microbiology is antibiotic resistance.
Which is terrifying for us, but obviously great for the bacteria.
Exactly. So let's say a single bacteria sitting in a muddy soil puddle naturally develops a random mutation that allows it to pump out a specific toxin.
Okay.
It is now effectively resistant to penicillin, for example.
Okay, so superbug A is born. It has a shield.
Now, a virus, specifically a bacteriophage, which is just a virus that specifically targets and infects bacteria, comes along and infects superbug A.
The shield doesn't stop the virus.
No, the shield is for the antibiotic. So the virus gets inside, and when the virus is inside building thousands of new copies of itself, it's actively chopping up the bacteria's DNA to use as raw building material.
Brutal.
It is. But sometimes, during this chaotic assembly process, the virus makes a mistake.
A copying error.
Right. It accidentally grabs a piece of the bacteria's original DNA, specifically that brand new resistance gene, and packages it inside its own viral protein shell instead of its standard viral instructions.
Oh, wow. So it packs the wrong luggage. It thinks it's packing a viral bomb, but it's actually packing the bacteria's shield.
Exactly. So it bursts out of superbug A, killing it in the process, and it floats over to bacteria B nearby.
And bacteria B doesn't have the shield.
Not yet. And let's say bacteria B is a completely different species of bacteria. The virus lands, attaches, and injects its DNA, which includes that stolen resistance gene.
Okay.
But because it doesn't have the full, correct viral instruction set to replicate and destroy the cell, it doesn't kill bacteria B.
It just uploads the data.
It literally just uploads the data. Bacteria B takes that new code and incorporates that gene straight into its own genome.
And
Suddenly, bacteria B has the exact same superpower. It didn't have to evolve it over 1 million years of trial and error.
It basically just downloaded an expansion pack in 5 minutes.
From the perspective of the hyperorganism, this mechanism is absolutely brilliant.
I mean, it is. It means that if one tiny part of the planetary system learns a novel solution to a new environmental problem, that solution can just be broadcast to other parts of the system.
It creates what the source calls a global cloud.
A global cloud.
That's the exact metaphor they use. Imagine the biosphere has an active cloud computing system. Viruses act as a globally distributed recombinase system.
Recombinase meaning they recombine the DNA.
Right. They are constantly, endlessly uploading and downloading snippets of code across the entire surface of the planet.
It really fundamentally changes how you view the process of evolution.
Hmm.
We usually think of evolution as this incredibly lonely, isolated struggle. Every single species fending for itself, having to reinvent the wheel from scratch.
Yes.
But this suggests it's actually much more like open source coding.
That's a perfect modern analogy. It is open source. Every organism contributes to the global repository through their own mutations, and everyone else can potentially download the patches. Without viruses, every single species would be a totally isolated, disconnected silo of information. With viruses, the sheer genetic ingenuity of life is shared. It literally turns the biosphere from a scattered collection of disconnected hard drives into the internet.
That is just incredible. Okay, so that's the first major function, information sharing, network connectivity.
Right.
But the paper mentions a second major function, which, I have to be honest, sounds a bit more destructive,
It does sound violent.
but they claim it's actually regulatory.
Yes. The paper calls this environmental homeostasis.
And they compare this specific function to the lysosome.
Right. Let's zoom back down to the level of a single cell again. Inside almost all of your cells, you have these tiny organelles called lysosomes.
I remember those. They're basically just little microscopic bags of acid and digestive enzymes.
Exactly, which sounds incredibly dangerous to just have floating around inside you.
It really does, like
Yeah.
swallowing a grenade.
But it's safely contained inside a membrane. And their job is vital. Their job is to break down waste, recycle old broken proteins, and digest anything the cell doesn't need anymore or things that are malfunctioning.
So they're the recycling center.
The recycling center and the demolition crew. If you didn't have lysosomes, your cells would rapidly fill up with toxic trash and they would die.
Okay, so it keeps the cell clean, it keeps the flow of physical materials moving.
Correct. Now, I want you to scale that concept all the way up to the planet. Specifically, let's look at the global oceans. The source discusses a phenomenon called viral lysis.
Lysis, that means popping cells, right?
Right.
Literally bursting them open and killing them.
Yes. To understand why popping cells on a massive scale is actually a good thing, you have to understand the sheer scale of life in the ocean.
Okay.
Bacteria and an algae in the ocean reproduce incredibly fast. If they are left completely unchecked by predators, a single species of algae could bloom uncontrollably across the surface of the water.
We see that sometimes, right? Red tides and things.
Yes. And if it goes unchecked globally, it would consume all the available oxygen, use up all the vital nitrogen, and physically block out the sun from reaching deeper water.
It would act exactly like a cancer. It would just endlessly multiply, take over the host, and then crash the whole system.
Exactly. It would become a biological monopoly that effectively starves everyone else to death. So, in this hyperorganism model, the viruses act as the essential regulators.
But how do they know when to attack? Is there some kind of chemical signal from the hyperorganism saying, deploy the viruses?
It's simpler than that. It's a matter of basic probability and physical density.
Oh, because they'll bump into each other more.
Exactly. When a population of bacteria gets too dense, viral transmission becomes highly efficient.
It's like being in a really crowded room in winter. The flu just spreads so much faster.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
The specific viruses targeting that specific overgrown bacteria spread incredibly rapidly through the booming population, and they lysed a massive percentage of them.
I mean, that sounds like an absolute plague.
From the perspective of the individual bacteria experiencing it, it is a tragedy. It is an outright apocalypse.
Right.
But from the perspective of the macro hyperorganism, it is simply homeostasis. It knocks that dominant monopolizing population back down to a manageable size, which allows all the other less dominant species to successfully compete. It actively maintains planetary biodiversity.
That makes sense.
Mm.
But there's another crucial layer to this, right? When those billions of cells suddenly pop, what happens to all the stuff that was inside them?
That is what oceanographers call the viral shunt.
The viral shunt.
This is a massive, crucial concept in global oceanography. When a cell bursts from lysis, its insides literally spill out into the water. Carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, raw DNA, amino acids, proteins,
All the building block.
all the nutrients that were selfishly locked up inside that living cell are instantly released back into the water column as dissolved organic matter.
So it's basically like massive instantaneous composting.
It is instant, highly potent organic fertilizer. If that plankton just lived a normal lifespan and died naturally, those heavy nutrients would likely be trapped in its body, sink all the way to the dark bottom of the ocean floor, and be completely lost from the surface food web.
Oh, wow.
By popping them near the surface, the virus rapidly recycles that material right where the sun is. This dissolved matter directly feeds the other surrounding plankton, which then feeds the krill, which then feeds the fish, which feeds the whales.
And the paper states that this specific process cycles absolutely massive amounts of carbon globally.
Unfathomably huge amounts of carbon. It physically ensures the metabolic health of the entire global ocean.
It keeps the nutrients flowing.
Yes, it actively prevents the biological system from locking up and freezing.
So if we didn't have viruses doing this, the ocean might just completely stagnate.
It would highly likely get locked up in massive, choking blooms of a few dominant species, followed by total ecological collapse. Nutrients would be trapped in living bodies, and they wouldn't be recycled nearly fast enough to sustain a diverse web of life. Viruses keep the metabolic pump priming. They ensure the critical flow of energy continues uninterrupted.
It's ruthless, but it's undeniably effective.
Well, that is nature. The overall health of the macrosystem very often requires the sacrifice of the microparts.
Yeah.
The lysosome destroys individual proteins so the cell can survive and build new ones. The virus destroys billions of bacteria so the broader ecosystem can sustain life and diversity.
Okay, so up to this exact point in the deep dive,
Yeah.
I can sort of comfortably keep this whole concept at arm's length.
Sure, it's happening out there.
Right. We have viruses acting as the internet for mud bacteria, and viruses acting as the brutal recycling crew for ocean algae. Those are really big, very abstract planetary roles,
They are.
but the source material then zooms in, and it gets, well, it gets uncomfortable.
It gets extremely personal very fast.
Because you could easily argue, okay, that's really great for the ocean, but I'm a human being. I'm highly complex. I have an advanced adaptive immune system. I clearly don't need viruses to run my specific body. I just need them to stay the hell away from me.
And that is exactly where the hard evidence found right inside the human genome comes in to completely shatter that assumption.
This section honestly blew my mind when I read it. The paper calls it the integrated organelle.
And the definitive smoking gun they point to here is something called endogenous retroviruses, or ERVs.
Let's define that really carefully so we don't lose anyone. What exactly is an endogenous retrovirus?
Well, a retrovirus is a specific type of virus that actually works by inserting its own viral genetic code directly into the hard drive, the DNA of the host it infects.
It splices itself in.
Exactly. HAV is probably the most famous modern example of a retrovirus. It writes itself right into your genetic code.
And obviously, usually, this is a very bad thing. It causes severe disease.
Usually, yes, it's destructive. But imagine this insertion happens not in a skin cell or a lung cell, but in a germline cell.
Meaning an egg or a sperm.
Exactly. If fertilization happens after that, that inserted viral code is now present in the very first cell of the zygote, which means it gets flawlessly copied into every single individual cell of the developing fetus.
Wow. So the baby is essentially born with the virus code permanently stamped in its DNA.
Yes. And if that baby grows up, survives, and has babies of its own, that exact viral code is passed on again. It becomes a permanent, inheritable fossil inside the genome of that entire species.
And that's what endogenous means.
Right. It becomes endogenous, meaning originating from within. It is now part of the host.
And the statistic the source gives for this,
Yeah.
roughly 8% of modern human DNA is definitively viral in origin.
8%. Let that sink in.
I really want to pause on that number. That is wild, because that's significantly more than the coding DNA that actually makes us distinctly human, isn't it?
It is.
I read somewhere that our actual protein coding genes, the specific stuff that builds human eyes and human skin and human organs, is only like 1 or 2% of our total genome.
That's absolutely correct. So if you look at it purely in terms of sheer volume of code, you are actually more virus than you are human instructions.
That is just, so we are essentially a mosaic. We are part virus.
We are a profound genetic chimera. Now, for a very long time, scientists looked at all this viral code and just called it junk DNA.
Right, I've heard that term.
They thought it was just the inert, dead graveyard of ancient infections that we happen to carry around.
Just baggage.
Right. But the paper goes much further than that. It argues it's not just junk sitting there like a museum fossil. Evolution is incredibly thrifty.
It uses what's lying around.
Yes. We have actively co-opted this ancient viral code. We don't just carry it, we use it.
This is the integrated part of the title. The mobile organelle stopped its commute, parked, and literally became part of our internal machinery.
Exactly. And the source highlights two specific, absolutely incredible examples to prove this. The first one involves a protein called syncytin.
Synceptin, this is directly related to the placenta,
It
right?
is completely fundamental to the existence of the placenta.
Okay, walk me through this.
Think about what an enveloped virus, a virus with an outer skin, needs to do to infect you. It physically needs to fuse its outer viral shell with the outer cell membrane of the host so it can open a channel and inject its genetic cargo.
It needs a very specific tool, like a fusion protein, a key to unlock and open the wall.
Right. Syncytin is precisely that, a viral fusion protein. Millions and millions of years ago, an ancient retrovirus infected our distant, egg-laying mammalian ancestors.
And instead of just fighting it off or dying, we kept the code.
We repurposed the code. Mammals essentially evolved a vital new use for that exact viral fusion capability.
Oh.
Well, think about pregnancy. The placenta is a temporary organ that physically connects the mother's blood supply to the growing fetus.
Right.
But this presents a massive biological problem. The fetus contains the father's DNA as well as the mother's. Therefore, from the perspective of the mother's body, the fetus is genetically foreign tissue.
Oh. So the mother's immune system should technically see it as a threat and attack it.
Mm.
It should reject the baby exactly like it would reject a badly matched kidney transplant.
Exactly. So how on earth do you physically connect them without triggering a massive fatal immune attack?
You need a shield.
You need a barrier that is perfectly seamless, no gaps for immune cells to squeeze through. The placenta forms a highly specialized layer called the syncytiotropoblast.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but structurally, it is a perfectly fused layer of cells. It's a single, massive, continuous, multinucleated sheet with no intercellular gaps.
And the specific protein that chemically allows those placental cells to fuse together so perfectly.
Is syncytin. It is the ancient viral protein. We are literally using a viral tool originally designed to aggressively breach and fuse with cells to seamlessly fuse our own cells together and create the safe interface of human life.
That is just, oh wow.
Without that specific viral infection millions of years ago, mammals exactly as we know them today, placental mammals, would simply not exist. We would very likely still be laying eggs.
So my physical ability to be born, or for any modern human to be born safely, relies entirely on a piece of code that we borrowed from a retrovirus.
Correct. The mobile organelle docked, and we quite literally built the most essential protective room of our biological house around it.
That is deeply incredible. It totally undermines the whole idea of human purity, doesn't it?
It destroys it.
We are built on viral foundations.
Yeah.
But, okay, the second example the paper gives, this one might actually be even crazier.
Yeah.
Because it's about the human brain.
Yes. The ARC protein.
Please tell us about ARC.
ARC is a specific gene that is absolutely critical for what neurologists call synaptic plasticity.
Which means what?
That's the physical ability of your individual neurons to change their connections and the strength of their signals. It is the literal, physical, biological basis of all human memory and learning. If you experimentally block the ARC gene in mice, they cannot learn anything new whatsoever. They are trapped in a permanent present tense.
Okay, so it helps neurons effectively talk to each other and remember the conversation.
It does. But recently, scientists decided to look at the physical 3D structure of the ARC protein under incredibly high-resolution electron microscopy.
And what do they see?
And they realized something genuinely shocking. The protein physically folds itself to form a capsid.
A capsid? Like a virus shell?
Structurally identical to a viral capsid. In fact, if you look at it genetically, it looks exactly like the geometric shell of an ancient retrovirus.
Wait. So inside my brain, right now as I'm forming memories of this exact conversation, my brain cells are physically manufacturing little tiny virus shells.
Yes, your brain is doing that right
Yeah.
now. The ARC protein forms these little viral capsid-like geometric structures. It then actively packages genetic information, specifically pieces of RNA inside them.
Unbelievable.
And then it physically travels out of one neuron, crosses the gap, and enters another neuron across the synapse.
It's using the viral delivery mechanism.
It is literally using the exact viral mechanism of packaging, protection, and transmission. But instead of transmitting a harmful infection, it is transmitting memory.
Wow.
It's moving vital information to physically strengthen the bond between those two neurons.
That is so profound. We literally think with viruses.
We do.
Mhm.
The fundamental machinery of human thought appears to be brilliantly repurposed viral machinery.
This really, really drives home the central point of the paper. The boundary between virus and host isn't a solid brick wall at all.
No.
It's a completely fluid interface.
It completely dissolves the standard us versus them narrative we've all been taught. If the highly complex machinery of our birth syncytian and the highly complex machinery of our thought ARC are both inherently viral in origin, you cannot logically separate the two anymore.
We are the hyperorganism.
Exactly. We are the hyperorganism. The virus is just the part of us that remembers how to travel, and the host is just the part of us that eventually decided to settle down and build a house.
It's the mobile organelle that sometimes just decides to park the car permanently and live in the garage.
And then eventually, over millions of years, it becomes the garage door opener.
I absolutely love that. Okay, so we've looked at the hyperorganism concept. We've broken down the fallacy of non-life. We've explored the massive planetary roles of connectivity and ocean regulation. And now the literal integration into our own human DNA.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. Now we have to wrap our heads around the big overarching conclusion of the source. The paper ultimately calls the virus the evolutionary operating system.
This is the grand synthesis of the entire argument they are making.
Okay.
If you view the entire global biosphere as a massive supercomputer or a highly complex machine, the virus is the OS. It's the operating system running in the background.
It's the hardware update.
Yes. Think about everything we've just discussed. The virus facilitates global communication through horizontal gene transfer.
Right.
It manages critical resources and population control through ocean lysis. It provides totally new, pre-packaged modules for radical new functions like SynSit and ARC.
It's constantly upgrading the system.
Exactly. And looking at it this way completely resolves the grand biological paradox of why viruses even exist in the first place.
Right. Because in the old traditional view, viruses are just these incredibly annoying, purely destructive parasites that evolution really should have just eliminated by now.
Yes.
I mean, if they only exist to kill us, why hasn't natural selection found a permanent way to just block them out completely after 4 billion years of trying?
It's a great question. Why are there still open chemical ports on our cells that they can use? Why haven't we evolved a solid, impenetrable wall to keep them out forever?
Because we need them.
Because a planetary biological system completely without viruses would eventually fail.
Let's play that out for a second. The alternative Earth.
Right.
What would a world without viruses actually look like? If I just snap my fingers right now and every single virus vanished.
The source heavily speculates on this exact scenario. Without viruses constantly moving code around, life would be immediately locked into what they call rigid, vertical silos.
Meaning if a single bacteria in the mud evolves a cool new trick, a new gene, it stays trapped strictly with that single bacteria.
And it dies with that bacteria's direct lineage if they get wiped out. Evolution would have to rely entirely on random, incredibly slow internal mutation and vertical inheritance from parent to child.
So it would be incredibly slow.
Glacially slow. The overall innovation of the biosphere would be terribly fragmented. There would be absolutely no rapid cross-pollination of genetic ideas across the planet.
And what about the populations, like the algae in the ocean?
Without viral lysis to keep things in check, you'd likely see massive, violent boom and bust cycles that are much more severe than anything we see today.
Because nothing is regulating them.
Right. Ecosystems would become incredibly brittle and unstable. Essential nutrients would get permanently locked up in the bodies of whichever species was temporarily dominating.
So the ocean would probably just turn into a stagnant, dead sludge of the single most aggressive algae.
Exactly. Until it starved itself to death. So the entire planetary system would be profoundly dumber, slower, and exponentially more fragile.
So with viruses continuously in the mix, the biosphere becomes, what is the exact quote from the paper? A dynamic, self-correcting, and highly intelligent genetic processor.
That is the key phrase of the entire paper, intelligent genetic processor.
It's a bold way to describe dirt and water and animals.
It is. But intelligence, in this strict biological and systemic sense, is simply the ability to process complex information and successfully adapt to a changing environment. Viruses are the mechanism that allows the biosphere to physically process genetic information on a global scale.
It literally turns the whole surface of the planet into a giant brain, basically.
In a purely functional networking sense, yes. A human brain connects discrete neurons using chemical signals to share information and learn. The biosphere uses mobile viruses to connect discrete species to share genetic code and adapt. It is the exact same underlying principle of distributed information processing.
That is such a powerful, paradigm-shifting image. It really does make you look at catching a flu or a common cold a little differently.
It definitely changes the context.
I mean, obviously, nobody likes getting sick. I'm certainly not saying we should throw a party and celebrate getting the flu.
No, absolutely not. And we have to be extremely clear about that nuance. We shouldn't romanticize human disease.
Right?
Viral infections can be entirely devastating to the individual human being. They cause immense suffering, they cause death. We fight them for very good reason.
But the deep dive today is about zooming out past the individual.
Exactly. What is devastating to the micro-individual may be mechanically essential for the macro system to survive and evolve.
It's the unavoidable cost of running the operating system. Sometimes the background update crashes your specific computer or tragically deletes a critical file. But if you stop doing updates entirely, the computer eventually becomes totally obsolete and stops working altogether.
That is a very apt, sobering analogy. The virus is the ultimate agent of biological change, and systemic change is inherently risky.
It is.
Change hurts at the individual level, but planetary stagnation is universally fatal.
So we've gone from viruses are dead, annoying things, to viruses are the literal intelligence of the planet. That is quite a journey for one deep dive.
It really is. It forces us to completely reconsider our fundamental place in the natural world.
We aren't the main characters anymore.
No. We are not just isolated inhabitants walking around on top of Earth. We are deeply embedded components of it. And the viruses are the tiny genetic threads that physically sew us into the larger quilt.
It's a lot to take in, really. Let's do a quick recap just to make sure we've got the main nuggets locked down for everyone before we sign off today.
Sure, let's hit the core points one last time.
Point 1. The Earth itself is a hyperorganism.
Right. It's not just a random collection of competing species, but a single, deeply interconnected physiological entity. It takes the old Gaia concept and turns it into a rigorous biological framework. We are essentially the localized cells of a massive planetary body.
Point 2. The non-living label we put on viruses is a semantic fallacy.
Yes. Viruses are only dead if you deliberately view them in total isolation on a table. If you actually view them in their proper context, the planetary network, they are mobile organelles. They are very much alive because of their critical function in the whole system.
Point 3. Their specific jobs in this system are connectivity and regulation.
Right. They act as the cloud computing network for genetics, actively moving genes across entirely different species via horizontal gene transfer, and they act as the waste management system for the oceans, rapidly cycling trapped nutrients and controlling runaway populations via viral lysis.
And point 4, the one that really got me, they are us.
Literally, physically built right into our DNA, 8% of the modern human genome is viral. We use ancient viral code to build life-giving placentas and to form our own memories in the brain. We are fundamentally integrated with the mobile organelle.
And finally, the big conclusion. The virus is the evolutionary operating system.
It makes the entire biosphere intelligent, dynamic, and capable of self-correcting. It actively prevents life from stagnating in isolated vertical silos.
It is the relentless hardware update of the biosphere.
Precisely.
You know, this whole deep dive leaves me with a final, slightly haunting thought.
Oh.
We usually spend so much of our time and billions of dollars trying to completely beat viruses. We sterilize our counters, we vaccinate, we distance ourselves. And obviously, for human health and survival, that is incredibly important.
Crucial.
But if this paper is right, we can never truly separate ourselves from them. In fact, if the machinery of our minds, that ARC protein is actually viral in origin, then every single thought you have about how much you hate viruses is literally being processed by a repurposed virus.
We cannot escape them because they are the architecture. Trying to permanently remove viruses from the biosphere would be exactly like trying to surgically remove every single white blood cell from your own body just because they sometimes cause uncomfortable inflammation.
Right.
You might successfully stop the local inflammation, but the entire macro system would immediately collapse and die.
We are permanently locked in this incredibly complex dance, a 4-billion-year-old dance of infection, integration, and constant evolution.
And that messy, beautiful, dangerous dance is precisely what we call life.
Well, on that note, I think I'm going to look at the world a little bit differently when I walk outside today. The trees, the soil, the air.
Hmm.
It's all just one big breathing body, and the viruses are just the endless invisible messages flying back and forth, keeping the whole thing alive.
It's a beautiful, if slightly unsettling perspective to carry with you.
The best deep dives always are. Unsettling, but deeply beautiful. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the global genome. We hope it sparks some new neural connections for you, maybe even using some of that viral ART protein right there in your own brain. Until next time, keep diving. We'll see you in the next one.